how do stories get made? We're excited to hear about the process from this group of truly exceptional creators. And now I'm so excited to introduce the wonderful Amy Kaufman of the LA Times.
Thank you guys for coming, and thank you, Audible, for having us. Very excited to have this panel. It's a great mix of directors, actors, producers, writers. It should be a really interesting conversation. So I'm just going to quickly introduce everyone, and then we'll get started. To my left is Heidi Ewing. You have 2 projects at Sundance this year. One is a narrative directorial debut, I Carry You With Me, and a Showtime docuseries called Love Fraud, which is about a bunch of ladies who get
Revenge.
Yes. Conned by an online dating dude.
Revenge is trending.
Yes. And then we have Ron Howard, who is here with Rebuilding Paradise, which is a documentary he made about Paradise, California, and sort of the aftermath of the wildfires that ravaged the town there.
And as a hat guy, let me just compliment you on your choice today.
Thank you so much. Sundance is where you got to bring your hat game. Then we have Amy Ziering. She is here with On the Record, which is a documentary she co-directed with Kirby Dick, her longtime creative partner. And the film is about a bunch of women of color who talk about the experience of coming forward during the Me Too movement and speaking out about their alleged sexual abuse that they suffered at the hands of Russell Simmons. And then Rebecca Hall, you play a widow who is living in a haunted ghost house by the lake, not the Lake House 2.0, but the film is called The Night House, and Rebecca's been at Sundance many times and is here as an actress in this. And we also have Sasheer Zamata. Yes. Zamata, my bad.
I love it. Zamata.
Zamata, tomato. Yeah. She is here with a wild film called Spree, in which she plays a stand-up comedian, so not like you're
big
familiar.
Stretch for me.
Yes, but probably not such a familiar territory is that your Uber-esque driver is a homicidal maniac who's like a serial killer, and you're the only one who can stop him.
Yeah. It's exciting because it's like a lot of action and, well, you'll see it.
Right.
But it's fun. And
So
I can't
these
believe we're in these chairs. What a mistake.
Right? Like,
this is such a hard thing to sit in.
but guys, like, how cool is her Sundance look? Is she so fashionable?
Oh my God, thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
so obviously a huge range of projects, and I wanted to sort of start maybe with you two talking about, because you've worked in both the narrative and the documentary space, and obviously projects at the same time in the festival in that space. Ron, to start with you, can I ask you how you decided to sort of veer into a documentary at this time in your career?
Well, at Imagine, we've always had a real interest in documentaries, and over the years we've made a few. We made one about wrestling, called Beyond the Mat. One about the making of the movie Deep Throat. That was on HBO, and so it's always been an area that fascinated us. We never really had time or the resources to do it, but now Imagine is a much more independently sort of funded company. We have a lot of autonomy, and so it's just something we've started moving into. And I was always afraid of it. But
why?
Well, because I love documentaries, but it's a different discipline, and I've grown up in the scripted world, always admiring documentaries. But I've gotten to know documentary filmmakers who did both. Spike Lee, I would talk to him a little bit about it. Martin Scorsese. Jonathan Demme was on, the late great Jonathan Demme was on the board of the Jacob Burns Film Center. I'm wearing their cap right now in Westchester County. It's a great group. And an opportunity came my way through Brian Grazer, Jay-Z, to do a documentary about a festival, music festival of his. And I had, I was curious, and I asked Jonathan, after a meeting, do you think I should take this risk? He was a great documentary director and, of course, brilliant Oscar-winning scripted director. He said, don't blink, just jump, go for it. And he says, the two things coexist because one's about shooting and discovering and then taking it back to the editing room, and the other one is focused and scripted. Take the leap. I did it, and I loved it. I know this is a long answer, but I then did the Beatles 8 days a week. Then I did Pavarotti. These are all documentaries, yes, but they're archival, and you kind of know where you're going. And as our documentary team took off, I wanted to try something else. Now, the fires in Paradise. In Redding, California, I have a lot of relatives. They had a horrible fire a couple of weeks before. Everyone in my family was okay, but we certainly were aware. Then the fire in Paradise, devastating. 95% of the houses burned down. Unbelievable tragedy. I was in my office with my assistant, then assistant, she's now producing documentaries, Louisa Vellis. We were talking about it, and we were saying, what's it going to be like to rebuild that? What would that be? And suddenly the word rebuilding Paradise came to mind. And because I felt a connection for the first time, it wasn't just that thing that happens where you look at these images, you absorb them, you recognize that it's a tragedy, and then you kind of go on with your day. I couldn't really go on with my day anymore. And so I went to Justin and Wilkes and Sarah Bernstein, and they run our doc department, and they said, let's send cameras. This is how you do it. I said, we don't quite know what the story is. They said, exactly. That's where we go and find out.
Right.
And we did. Nat Geo came in and supported us, and it's been a remarkable experience, an inspiring experience, and it did go in unexpected directions. But I feel like I've learned a lot, and I think hopefully audiences will feel that they really understand it and empathize with this kind of situation in a way that they hadn't before.
Right. That's so interesting to hear you say you were tentative about entering the doc space, because for you, Heidi, like, you
I
came
love
from the
hearing that he was scared to go into the doc. Ron Howard was afraid to make a documentary. We were horrified to hear you were starting to make documentaries. We were like, stay in your lane, dude. Like, I gotta compete with him now at Sundance? I was like, this isn't real. But it's real, and welcome.
Thank you. I feel welcomed.
I hope you
enjoy
welcome me, because I just made my first narrative.
Yeah, very exciting.
And I understand the fear and well, for me it was terror, because this is my first narrative film at the festival. I Carry You With Me, Te Llevo Conmigo. It's a Spanish language film. And it started out as, it's a film about two of my friends. It's a love story about two men who meet in a time and place in Mexico. They can't live openly as a gay couple, and they end up emigrating to the United States. It's about a lot of things, but that's it in a nutshell. And my friends told me that their life story many years ago, and I started to think, oh, well, this would be an amazing documentary. I have to tell this story, and I sat them down for an interview, and I realized very quickly that I'd be shooting the third act of a movie, because the film started when they were 10 years old in rural Mexico. And so I thought, oh, I guess I can't do it. Guess I can't tell the story. Or I could write it, or I could script it, or I could make a narrative. And I was like, can I do that? And that's what I ended up doing, because the story, I had to tell it, but it couldn't be a satisfying documentary film. And so, the leap is real. The leap is real, and it seems like an inverse process, because in a documentary you can have an idea, you can get a camera, and you can go out and you can do a test shoot like tomorrow, and that really is not available to you in a narrative with the performers and the act. It's just not, you can't. The process is different. Editing, we edit for 12 months in documentary film, especially for cinema verite. That's very unusual in narrative. So the schedule is inverse, and working with actors was new, but it was exhilarating. And you didn't even ask me a question, and I'm talking.
No, I love it.
But because that's I guess I'm nervous. But basically, it's like the idea of, I tried not to abandon everything I know how to do, which is, follow a story. You don't want the camera anticipating what's going to happen next. So I did bring a lot of the principles that I use in documentary work into my first narrative, because I didn't want to make that mistake that some filmmakers make, where suddenly I have to be a different filmmaker, and everything's got to be static and locked down, and everything's on a dolly, and where's my Steadicam? Why? So I was careful to only use the tools I needed to tell the story, and it's very high production value, but I was careful not to run away from everything I've learned in the last 20 years as a doc maker. But it was a wonderful experience to switch genres.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It is, I imagine, it's just a completely different learning curve. And Amy, you started this film in the midst of an evolving news story. Can you talk about sort of how the final product ended up being what it was? Because in the beginning you were thinking, we don't know where the story's going to take us, right?
Yeah, what I love about the documentary space is that it's completely unknown. Like, you don't know. I'm the kind of person that I get bored like easily. So what I love is the sort of complete like adventure and the precipice you're always on. Like, it's always like a scary moment because it could always fail. And so for me, that's always motivating. And what happened was we had made 2 other films, The Invisible War and The Hunting Ground. The Invisible War premiered here at Sundance, and they were on a sexual assault. The first one was on assault in the military. The second one was on assault on campuses. We've done a lot of other documentaries, though. Those just happened to be 2 that we had done. And so when the Me Too happened, our cell phones exploded, and people were saying, "You guys need to be in this space." And we were kind of like, because of that joy and exhilaration I get from the unknown, I was like, kind of been there, done that, like, let's move on. But everyone was like, no, like, you guys know this, and you have to honor that knowledge and jump in. So we dove in and didn't know where it was going, and the last thing we expected to be doing was a film about the music industry and hip-hop. I mean, look at me. It's not really a genre fit. But we cast a wide net. Like, this was back in right post whenever the New Yorker articles came out. 2017. So I was getting phone calls from women from all walks of life and all different industries, and we met this one character, and she was electric, and her story was mesmerizing. And it was things that I didn't know about. I knew about sexual assault, but I really hadn't done a deep dive into the plight of women of color with sexual assault and all the quadruple bind you're in that situation, which is unique and profound and something that our culture at large really doesn't know or hasn't amplified. So we started, that's how that happened. So it was just, it's this organic and very unintentional path, but it's kind of what, this alchemy that happens, and then you're inspired and you go. So that's sort of the genesis, if that was your question.
Yeah. So we're hearing the filmmaker's version of this, and for you guys as actresses, are you, first of all, aware of the journey that a project has gone through before it gets to you? And how much thought are you putting into, like, this is a year of my life? Like, how do you really decide when the project is right for you at a moment in your life?
There's a lot of factors. It's sort of, I guess it's sort of wherever it meets on the Venn diagram that your life collides with definitely a project gets greenlit and it's a right moment in your life. And I don't know, it's hard for an actor. We don't have much control or power in these things. I mean, often I'll say, yes, I want to do that project, and then it doesn't happen for 2 years. And then by then, there's this sort of sense of like, do I still really want to be doing this? Is everything? No, I do, or I don't. And it's a very kind of unreliable matrix.
Yeah. Do you have to, Sasheer, with this movie, obviously you play a comedian. Yeah. You are a comedian. How much is it important that you actually relate to the character? Like, was that something that drew you to this?
Well, a lot of things drew me to this. I like that because it's about social media and how it kind of can trap some people, and I feel like that's a very real topic, and I like working in fields that feel very real and are reflective of what's going on. It doesn't hurt that I'm a comedian. It's very easy for me to do that, and there was like a stand-up component in the movie, so that was like easy. But I also do like doing things that don't feel normal or regular to me.
Yeah.
And that was definitely in this movie too. Like, I've never had a car chase. I've never had to have violent moments, and that's cool to explore. But mostly when I look at a project, I just want to know, will I have fun? I want to have fun in some kind of capacity. And that doesn't mean like I'm laughing every day, but just like, I don't know, I'm enjoying myself. Maybe the people involved are really people I feel like I can learn from, or maybe the script is something that's cool. And I want to leave feeling like I got something new out of it. Like, oh, the audience is going to see me do a new thing, and that's great. Or I get to do this new type of performance I've never done before. Or I just get to like be a different person that people haven't seen. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah. You're talking about the social media questions this film raises, which if you guys see it, you'll reevaluate your relationship with your phone probably. Yeah. But so for all of you, why the stories that you're telling now, especially the ones that have maybe newsier hooks, like how quickly after the fire happened were you thinking, like, I need to do this and I need to do this now and this is important and on people's minds?
I think it was about a week.
Wow.
And because the question, again, I was so acutely aware of what had gone on in Reading, and now here was a case where I was a part of the town that had vanished. And again, I knew these people. And these are people with real pride and a real pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. And suddenly they're devastated. I just was, you know, it started to really matter to me. And so I think we had a camera crew there within maybe 10 days or 2 weeks, and then I went up, and then we just kind of kept going, and then Zan and Liz, our producers, field producers, they kept going in, and I would go, and when I couldn't go, I'd FaceTime with them and check back in with the people, and we just kept gathering this material and finding the characters to follow. And so, the interesting thing to me is that all year I was also directing a scripted adaptation of J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. And so for years...
It's coming out this year, right?
End of the year, yeah.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, both these films will come out at roughly the same time. But they two have almost like communicated with one another through me in a way. And I've had the editors of both films visit and see the cuts and talk about it because, you know, they both deal with a sort of a similar cultural sensibility. And it's one that I really relate to. So I've been, in a way, looking for a way to deal with those kinds of characters in real world circumstances that would be relatable and human and not to be judged, but just understood.
Yeah.
For a long time, and I wound up with 2 projects that, in a way, deal with that.
There you go. Yeah, and Heidi, I mean, with Love Fraud especially, when I was watching it, it kind of like, I was like, oh, this is like very of the moment of the sort of like true crime thing that people can't get enough of, something that's developing in literal real time as you were filming it. I mean, are you thinking as a filmmaker like, oh, this will sell right now, like people are really into this genre?
It was totally calculated. I knew it was going to sell, and no, it really was. I think it's a zeitgeist. Things happen in the people are thinking about similar things at the same time. So we started Love Fraud about a couple of years ago. I read a book about a bigamist and couldn't stop talking about it with Rachel Grady, my co-director on Love Fraud. And so we did our own dive and found this incredible blog. In terms of my narrative film, it also, you know, there was an immigration component to the film. And the strange thing was that I started thinking about the movie and shooting and also doing some writing under Obama. And I'm finishing the film and premiering it under Donald Trump. And in the case of my film, it will change the way people talk about the movie, which I have to accept. It's not a political film. It's not an advocacy film. It's a love story. It's a beautiful film. There is an immigration component, which suddenly I think, you know, we're drawn to in a different way.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting experience because it was never the intention. But I think, you know, as filmmakers, you go with their gut. The films take the time that they take, and then they find a home, and also they find a conversation, and you can't control that conversation. We try, but you know, I think that Sunday when I premiere, I'll have to just sort of let the film into the world and let people talk about it the way they want to, and it no longer is mine anymore.
Right.
But yeah, you know, it takes so many years to make these projects that, you know, when you launch it, and you know, it could be a completely different moment in time. And with Love Fraud also, you know, it's the Me Too movement has caught up, and the lens changes, and I think that is such an amazing thing. It's like it's amorphous. It's a living document.
Yeah.
And as a filmmaker, you just have to accept that and just see where the conversation goes.
I want to talk about some of the challenges you guys face in getting these things made. And Amy, obviously, right now you are going through one. We're talking about how you got things made, and part of that was initially for you with Apple and Oprah Winfrey. And in the last week, there's been a very public news story in which Oprah and Apple are no longer involved. Can you talk about just what the past couple weeks have been like for you, and now what it's like being at Sundance with this changed sort of situation? No?
It's been great.
Yeah,
Yeah. we're really happy and grateful to be here. We're grateful that Sundance stood by the film. We 100% stand by the stories of these women, and we knew that once the distribution path had been announced, there was no turning back and there was no blinking, because if you turn back and blink, you inevitably make people think there might be a problem with the stories or the women or the veracity, and that's something we never ever do. We honor the stories we tell, we fact check, we're rigorous, and we vet everything. So we're extremely excited to be here. We're very grateful. It's gotten a lot of press. I never thought I'd get press before a movie in this way, but here it is. But I do want to say something interesting that Heidi said about landscape and how interesting it is when and where things land, and especially what I was talking about that surprise. You know, we had made another film before this called The Bleeding Edge about the medical device industry, and when we made that film, it was on Netflix, and it's just about sort of, I mean, I guess the punchline is we're all guinea pigs. Like, you think this stuff is regulated? Well, guess what? It's like I called it like Jaws meets Hospital, like a horror film for anyone going under any kind of surgery with devices. But anyways, what I was saying about that film is we really thought it would land in a Clinton world, and we were kind of calculating on that. That was, and it landed instead in this dystopia, or maybe it's always been here and we never saw it. But so it also completely changed the reception, and all that we thought that could happen, was. So anyways, I don't know why I went there, but I did. So here we are. But anyways, so I wanted to say one other thing about this film, though. It isn't just about this woman. It's about a whole set of incredible voices. I want to make sure I say that. And also that it's not what you think. It also does have this, when I said about that surprise, it's kind of you don't know what she's going to do. Like, we met her before she knew if she was going to tell this story to anyone. Let alone be in a film. So we just sort of, that's what I mean about that element of surprise. And literally for a good 6 months or longer, we were just following her without any guarantee she'd even give us a release. So we were following a lot of other women at the same time. Like, there was no sense that there'd be a there there. So we're just glad there is a there there, and we're here, and look forward to everyone seeing the movie.
Yeah, totally. It is interesting how Sundance, I'm sure the experience of seeing it with people changes it for you, especially like in a horror film where you maybe haven't seen the effects fully played out, and the sounds and the jump scares and everything.
I haven't seen any of it, actually.
Oh, you haven't seen it
Yeah, no,
yet?
I'm seeing it for the first time tonight.
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
Bad
seems
idea, right?
unfair.
No, I just didn't really get round to it. There was additional pickups fairly recently, so they were still in the edit and doing stuff, and up until very, very recently. So I don't,
Wow. So is that an experience that you look forward to? Because
No.
it's like
No,
maybe in this genre.
No,
in
I
specific.
do. I think
Yeah.
it's probably a better situation. It's probably a more realistic situation to see a movie that you're in. I don't know. It's very hard for me to be objective, especially about like a film like Night House. I know for a fact that I am in every frame of it because it's pretty much just me in a house. And it's, it might be just, just slightly hard to watch it.
Yeah.
But better to watch it with people so I can have some sense of, oh, okay, that's what's really happening, as opposed to what might be going on in my head.
Right. In terms of challenges, go ahead. Yeah.
That's a question. Do you get scared in a horror movie if you're in it?
Oh, God, no. No, I kind of
Like watching it?
Yeah, I like doing horror movies because there is this sort of sense you're asked to do things that are sort of high extremity as an actor that you might not get to do in other things, and often like the horror becomes metaphorical for something else, and I think that can often yield quite interesting results. And some of the great films, I think, like I don't know, The Shining and Rosemary's Baby, are horror films essentially. So I'm always kind of attracted to them, but they're not actually scary to make. Because no matter how much you're, running down corridors and screaming, there's, generally a bloke with a sandwich.
Right.
Just, it's like, and it's overlit and everything is, there's
So you weren't
nothing.
like having nightmares.
Well, there's no
at
mood
night.
music, and there's no.
When you're watching the finished film.
I hope so, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I could be, yeah.
You know, I tried something, coming from the documentary world, my cinematographer, Juan Pablo Ramirez, was not happy about this, but a couple of times we used zoom lenses, which, you know, it's like, it's sacrilegious in features, don't do it. But we had a desert crossing scene at night in the desert in Mexico, and we used a super long lens, and I removed the whole crew, and they were out there by themselves, the 2 actors, and they legitimately got scared. They weren't used to they didn't know where we were. So we were like behind bushes and trees and things like that. And I felt real great because that's how I make docs. I was like, tell everyone to leave. Don't tell them we're shooting. And they legitimately they told me that it was the most amazing experience as actors for them because they just didn't know they were living it. And there were spiders and stuff.
Also that other Safdie brothers movie where they shot it all on long lenses, so the actors were never aware of a crew or anything and just in it, which I think is kind of
Make a
brilliant.
horror film,
Yeah.
I'll make sure it's a long lens.
Yeah.
That's like the polar opposite of your experience, where a lot of it takes place in a car, and there's how many cameras in the car?
Maybe 8, and then it's a lot on cell phones. So there were times where I was holding the phone.
So I was going to ask you that. Were you
Yeah.
filming yourself a lot of times?
Myself, what's in front of me. Yeah, there's a lot of like.
So you get a DP credit.
I hope so.
So were you hyper aware of just like every angle is like I gotta be?
Yes and no. I was trying not to like overthink it and be like, because I'm also performing too, so I
Right.
didn't want to be like, okay, film me, but make sure to get this, and then oh, this is a good angle, you know, like that's part of it. But also, I was like, sometimes when I wasn't paying attention were the best shots, where I was just like quickly just throwing the phone around, and then it's like, whoa, that looks real cool. So I don't know. It was like a mix of being aware of my space, but also just trusting the moment and being alive.
Yeah. And what was it like acting in a car like that?
You know, I don't. Just,
Was it moving?
yeah.
Okay, that
Yeah.
seems like a challenge. It's like so
yeah.
much.
I mean, all of it was weird. So I'm a passenger getting into a ride share, and if you get into a lift and there's 8 cameras, you're gonna be like, this is strange.
Yeah.
So all of it was strange, and all I had to do was react and be like, what the fuck, you know, what it is. But yeah, it's interesting because I'm stepping into the main character. His name is Kurt, and he's like desperately trying to be social media famous and trying really drastic and dangerous ways to get there. And I'm stepping into his world once I get in this car. And it really kind of shows you how much you're doing that when you get into a stranger's car like that. And it's like, now he's the boss. And it's about trying to figure out the power dynamic and how much control I have in the situation. And you'll be amazed to see what happens.
There you go. Right. So your character basically isn't aware that she's being filmed.
Yeah.
And isn't comfortable in that. And I'm thinking about in a documentary, obviously a lot of your subjects are not people who are used to being in front of a camera. And in both of your cases, their subjects have gone through something very traumatic. How do you approach something so sensitive when you're speaking to someone in such an intimate fashion?
I love to converse, but sort of keeping that interview going, keeping it going a little longer. In fact, at this point, I will admit that occasionally, the doc producer, the veteran, jumps in and does know how to keep it going.
Yeah.
In the case of Rebuilding Paradise, our doc teams, which would kind of rotate through we had local camera folks and people, our producers, me, we kept rotating around, and these people, they paid us a great service by allowing us to keep coming back into their lives during this gauntlet that they were experiencing, and it wasn't always pretty, and it couldn't have been comfortable.
Yeah.
Very often. So at first there was a little fascination, and of course I think maybe a little relief that somebody cared about their story. And later, I think they almost felt an opportunity or a responsibility to help tell the story. They began to realize they were in the middle of something that perhaps their pain might offer somebody some understanding and some relief.
Yeah, what I do with anyone who's gone through a trauma is, I sit down with them. First, I talk to them on the phone first, and I make sure this is, but then absolutely I make it a sacred space. It's almost like a therapy session, honestly. And I sit them down before the crew is there and everything, and I say, listen, you've gone through enough. I don't want to add anything to I don't want to lose any sleep tonight that I did anything more to harm you, and I don't want you to lose any more sleep. So this is a perfectly safe space. If I ask you anything you don't want to answer, fine. If you start answering something and change your mind, fine. If you want to stop the interview at any point and leave, fine, 100%. I said, this is, you're in control. Trauma is when you're not in control of something that's happened to you. So I said, you're in control of this. Do not feel any pressure that I'm here. Do not feel any pressure that the crew is here. I said, this is all about you. And what's been so interesting, especially now and sort of like, we're in this shockwave of people sort of excavating trauma from people, so I do hear from a lot, especially in the wake of Me Too, a lot of women that have told their stories on the news or something. They said, no one's ever done that, that it's this.
Giving them the freedom to stop it?
Right, giving them the freedom to stop it and giving them just saying this is no one's, and it's okay. You don't, because people often, as we all know, when you ask them a question, they think they have to come up with an answer, but I don't, I might be trespassing a boundary they don't feel comfortable sharing, so I want them to know that, this is, and I think that's in part why we get so much of the great material, honestly, we end up getting, is because people feel safer. In fact, this was a poignant moment in Invisible War, actually. We premiered here, and I didn't know this, and then we, did the Q&As, and in one of the Q&As, one of the lead subject, Corey Choka, people asked her what it was like working with us, and she said, Miss Amy, she called me Miss Amy. She said, Miss Amy was doing my interview, and I broke down, and I was having kind of a flashback, and they stopped, and she hugged me, and she said, you're safe. No one here is going to hurt you. And she said, no one had ever said that to her before. Like, she didn't have to go back and do it again. So, I mean, it's yeah, I think that's very important for anyone who's thinking about working in any kind of documentary space with people who've been through things, is to really give them that power and that sense of, an embrace.
It's really interesting, that freedom to shut it down if they feel uncomfortable. I like that. We're talking about, this audience here, I'm sure, is a lot of aspiring filmmakers and actors, and I want to talk about some of your beginnings in the industries you're in, because I know there's always an interest in what advice can you give me, and da-da-da-da, and that's a hard thing to answer. But when you think back on something you wish you maybe knew at the start of your career, especially I think for actors it's hard to answer that because a lot of it is time and space and luck, but do you think there's something you wish you knew when you started out, Rebecca?
I suppose it's useful to know. I think when you start out, certainly when I started out, there's this sense of I'll do this project, and then I'll get to this project, and then I'll get to the films that I want to make, and then I'll be this kind of an actor, and then there's pretty rapidly you realise there aren't really stepping stones like that. Nothing's linear, and it's so variable. And you sort of know this intellectually, but knowing it on a gut level as an actor and knowing it intellectually is kind of two different things. And I think actually learning that gives you a lot of freedom to stop worrying about it and just pick things that you find interesting and not worry about the outcomes.
I also create content, my own stuff. So I feel very fortunate that I don't have to wait just for someone to hire me.
Yeah.
So even though I have always been doing that, I guess I wish that I knew that I can always rely on that. Even if I don't get the job, I didn't get hired on this project or whatever, I can always fall back on my writing or something I wanted to create with my friends or something like that, because that's also fruitful and sometimes will help you get to the next thing, because people now see, oh, that's her voice, or that's how she likes doing this thing, or I've never seen her do that thing before, and she could be over here doing this thing. So. Yeah, as anybody who ever asks what can I do as a young actor, I'm like, create,
Right.
Make your own stuff.
That's what you're in control of.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd say that I wish I knew when I started out. I learned it pretty quickly, but at the beginning of your career, you feel so lucky that somebody wants to finance your project or your idea, and you're so grateful. And I think it's important to remember that the world needs us, and that the world needs stories and filmmakers and creatives, and they're real lucky too when we work with them. It's just a mental thing. It's just there's incredible value to an original story, and someone who's willing to tell it with compassion and emotion, and give up so much of what we give up in our lives, which is all of our time and our everything, to make these films. Everything goes for at least a chunk of time, and so that's important to know. And also to only tell if you can manage it, only pitch and try to sell stories that you're able to stomach and tolerate, and you're willing to be friendly with for many years, because it's nothing happens quickly, nothing. So you have to make sure you're going to look the story in the eye and say, I love you. I commit to you for at least a few years. Like, you and me, babe. It's really this relationship with all that's it's going to take out of you. I think that's important to know. And also just what I learned recently, this is not a negative thing, it's a positive thing, but if you're working in fiction, you must also produce your work. The director has a lot less power in fiction than in documentary. And I co-produced my film, no issues, but I was really glad I did, because I realized on location who's calling the shots, who can approve overtime, whoa, they're like, we got to talk to your producer. I'm like, you're looking
That's
at
me,
her,
yeah.
we're good. But I was like, what if I couldn't say that? I wouldn't be able to go another half hour, and I don't have
That's
what I need.
interesting.
So I think, I just learned that. So I think it's very important in scripted to understand how the hierarchy works.
Yeah. Would you guys agree with that about the producing?
Yeah, I've been able to be a producer, been very active, proactive in that way from the very beginning. You were asking about the earliest memories, or just getting going. Well, they needed a baby to cry in a grade C Western that my dad was playing the villain in. And so they decided if they gave little Ronnie the Indian tomahawk, rolled cameras, and took it away, he might cry.
Right.
And, it worked. I grew up in such a bizarre circumstance
yeah.
that what I did was I didn't even really understand much about audiences or anything. But I did, early on, see the joy of creative problem solving. And I was very lucky to be in an environment where even I was weirdly kind of included in that, and I felt safe in that. And so I've always had that as a kind of a foundation and a belief, and it's comfortable for me on a set. My living room and the set are the two places I'm probably the most comfortable.
Wow.
But once I started directing, there's a period of about 7-8 years. I was young. I directed my first movie at 23. There was a period of years
No pressure.
where I was doing fine. But I was also afraid of engaging with really elite collaborators. I was looking for help among my friends and so
Your
forth,
peers,
and
yeah.
that was fine. That was good. But I wish earlier on I would have recognized that that you can be in a conversation with an absolute genius, and you might know in your heart that you're not. But if you share something, a belief in an idea, the conversation will be valid. And so that spirit of collaboration with the very smartest, most demanding, best people you can possibly be working with is an immediate goal. And so I wish I'd been a little bit more ambitious or bolder about seeking that out sooner.
You guys are kind of saying, like, be humble, but also know your worth, is sort of, yeah. What about you, Amy? What do you wish what would you tell your younger self?
I can't say what I tell my younger stuff, but I had a funny line, but I had to self-censor. Honestly, I was just talking to Kirsten Johnson. Those Kirstens and Kirstens just have to get together and decide how to pronounce their fucking names. I'm so over it, right? And you say, like, Kirsten Gillibrand, you said it wrong, Anyways, Kirsten Johnson, amazing filmmaker, amazing. KJ, who's like a genius. So we ran into each other yesterday, and we both worked. She actually was she was the cinematographer on my first film. She was in film school, and we got a grant from the French embassy to shoot Jacques Derrida. I know this is a conversation ender, but anyways, I was Jacques Derrida in France, and she was in FEMIS, and I saw her thing, and anyway, so I hired her. Anyway, so we're old friends, and we just ran into each other last night, and we both were talking about, because she had directed a film really early on. I said, whatever happened to that film you directed, which was kind of interesting. It was people who read books and then got infected by the books, and it was like a virus. And I said, that was sort of really prescient, because now we're in this sort of information age where everyone's sort of affected by propaganda and it's toxic, right? And so she says, God, I can't believe you remember that. I can't believe you thought of it. And then a light went off and she said, why didn't we believe in ourselves? Because she was like 23 and then she just went behind the camera until very recently. And I looked at her and I said, I know, I directed Derrida. And then I started producing. And she said there was something about our generation that we just thought it wasn't our place. And I remember I gave an intro to your film, and you didn't know I was crying. And I was saying, I'm so proud of you guys, Rachel and Heidi, for directing your docs. And it was just very emotional for me because I felt like that wasn't my place. And I was so glad the next generation felt they had the authority and the self-worth or the self-value or something, you know, to feel that was their voice. So I guess that's what I would tell myself and tell my girls is, and tell all of you out there is, you know, you are worthy and this is your place and own it.
Yeah. That's a beautiful message to wrap this up on. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. And everyone, be sure to check out these amazing films that they've made and become a part of. And thank you all for coming.